Ache Willow, Season 6, Chapter 8, Wool versus Flannel. I am a cook. I know, this isn't news to you. It does bear mentioning again, however, because with cooking comes a certain amount of danger. While no one thinks of baking brownies as a high-risk activity, that's a false impression. Cooking means playing with sharp objects and hot things. Between enormous razor-sharp knives, boiling oil, and stoves running at searing temperatures, a cook is never more than a moment away from injury. Don't believe me? Take a look at my arms and hands. Not every red mark and discolored patch of skin comes from the coffee machine's hostile ministrations. Every inch of damaged flesh comes with a story. Usually a tale of inattention and lack of care, but sometimes it goes a little beyond that. Most cooks will have the telltale mark of an oven burn on their wrist, but also we have one or two burns or cuts that were inevitable, injuries born not of a distracted mind, but of fated circumstances. A kitchen, even a home kitchen, can become a terribly busy place. Most meals worth the challenge are a juggling act. Dishes must be timed precisely. Delicate operations need to be balanced without error so that everything arrives on time at everyone's table. Under such conditions, accidents are bound to happen. When they do, however, there is no room for lamentation. More often than not, when suffering an injury, the correct reaction is to suffer through the initial pain. After all, if burned by a drop of boiling oil while carrying a hot pan, one cannot drop their load to scream in agony. Better to crack a tooth and hold it in than to spill more boiling oil. Stabilize the situation, then treat the injury. Life as a cook taught me to keep my composure even as the stress burns the skin. Seeing little Nisha pull out a crochet stuffed canary from her bag was like a drop of oil on my hand. It's a credit to my experience that all I dropped was a plate of pastries. Before I'm inundated with questions like, "Are you okay?" and "What happened?" I drop to my knees, picking up pastries and cookies as fast as possible. Sorry, I repeat, glancing up at Nisha with every apology. Must have slipped from my hands. Getting tired is all. Sorry. From the corner of my eye, I can see Stefan dutifully shrugging before walking off to fetch a broom. Old reliable. Stabilize the situation. Perhaps I'm overreacting. After all, this may only be a coincidence. Nisha has an obvious love of stuffed animals and dolls. Surely this is not the crochet canary from last night. It may not even be from Ophelia's shop at all. All sorts of people will knit and crochet stuffed toys. Looking up to check on the girl and her toy, I see the logo of the Ache Willow Cafe in the window, a reminder of where I am and how this town, above all others, loathes a coincidence. Meanwhile, Nisha sits on her chair, orange juice in hand, staring down at me as if I were some curious animal. We lock eyes and I smile, about to ask where she got her new friend when a black shadow steps in front of me. A black leather shoe, polished and clean as if it were new, crushes a chocolate chip cookie. The food wasn't salvageable, of course, but I could have given it to the raccoons. Now it's nothing but crumbs. All day, Ms. Dufour, I've been getting the impression that you are not taking this venture seriously. Looking down on me, Gagnon appears to be at the very end of his rope. He frowns in that way he used to when a student had missed his instructions. There's a mute tension to his jaw that doesn't find relief even while he speaks. His hands are like uncaged dogs, running wild around him, as if he didn't know quite what to do with his fingers. There was a time where one would be balled up in anger, while the other would point to his student's face, finger an inch from their nose. But the Aquilo isn't a classroom, and no one here is his student to bully. I am taking this seriously, I explain, doing my best not to sound intimidated. It's just been a trying day. I take the broom from Stefan's hand, detaching the dustpan so I can start sweeping the debris and broken ceramic. Trying days are part of the routine, Miss Dufour, Gagnon goes on, foot still firmly planted over a crushed cookie. There will always be trying days, and there will be terrible or catastrophic days between them. I don't know how you've been running this place up until now, but if you can't adapt to a trying day, how do you expect to remain in business? He watches me sweep, head turned away so he doesn't see me biting my lip. I want to lash out like I did back in school. After all, what do I owe him? What power does he have over me? The answer should be none, except that I have relinquished a piece of agency by accepting to be a part of his show. He's investing in me, in the Aquilo, and for that, I have a responsibility towards the man. Looking around, I can only guess at the value of the equipment cluttering my dining room. The cameras alone must cost tens of thousands of dollars. All that without mentioning Gagnon's time. While I may not have thought much of him in the past, there's no denying that every minute of him comes at a calculated price tag. All of that he's offering me, including his 2.7 million strong audience. The only thing I have to do in exchange is cook. And I was going to cook anyway. I've swept everything up, gathered all the broken ceramic, flakes of pastry, and crumbs of cookies into a nice pile ready to be picked up. All that remains is what's hidden under Gagnon's immaculate shoe. Hospitality, I answer, nudging his foot with the tip of my broom. Gagnon remains like a stone, immovable apart from a nervous trembling of his fingertips. The way he stares into my eyes is like he's trying to find the student in me again. She's there, of course, a scared, meek version of myself that remembers all too well the humiliation of being removed from school. But I keep her hidden, buried deep enough in the experience of the past 2 years that I hope Gagnon will never find her, that no one will ever find her. At long last, his foot rises, moving aside a few inches. "Tomorrow morning, then," he orders. "We'll pick up where we left off. Bertrand, take the cameras and electronics. Everything else you can leave behind." Our conversation concluded, Chef Frederic Gagnon turns around and walks back to his table. I watch, all the while sweeping those last few crumbs. I wonder, watching him pick up his notepad and pen, stuffing them into a fine leather bag. Nisha gives him a radiant smile, which, of course, he doesn't return. "Tomorrow," he repeats without turning back as he exits the door. Chef Gagnon, however, isn't the kind of man who ever completely leaves a room. Behind him, he's left all his equipment, along with his 2 assistants, and of course a thick hush that no word dares challenge. Bertrand is slow to start on his work. All these expensive and complicated cameras, lights, and microphones wait to be disassembled, packaged, and taken away, but my old classmate remains frozen. He is still that young student, and even though the browbeating wasn't meant for him, he was close enough to ground zero that he felt the impact. I offer him a wry smile, a weak attempt to break the spell. Just like old times, I want to say, but without the use of words. Eventually, as the rest of the Aquilo's diminished population goes about its business, Bertrand snaps out of it and gets to work. I dump the broken plate and assorted debris in the trash and pick up any immediate food items or dirty dishes that still clutter the cafe. Only once I feel like I've done everything else that needed doing can I focus once more on hospitality. Treat the injury. "I see you've got a new friend?" I asked Nisha, sitting at the table next to hers. "I do," she answers, tearing her brownie into 5 portions. "Her name is Citron." A good host to the last, Nisha puts a piece of brownie into each of the 4 plastic plates arrayed in front of her toys. With Gagnon gone, she's taken over the full table to accommodate her little dinner party, going so far as to fold napkins for every one of her guests. "Do you have any friends, Miriam?" The question takes me by surprise. I was going to ask where she got citron, hopeful still that it's not from pearls of wisdom, but Nisha's mind seems as inquisitive as my own. "A few. You know Miss Fig. I'm also friends with Annabelle and Gulliver, the man with the big truck. You know him?" She nods, keeping her focus on the bear, bunny, doll, and canary. It's only after a moment of contemplation that she turns to face me, a look of serious concern on her face. "But do you have any friends like mine?" "Friends like hers?" she asks. I struggle to decide if she's asking me if I own stuffed animals and dolls, or if she's looking for something more fantastical. "I'm friends with the raccoons out back, and—" I hesitate. How much do I want to share with the girl? Not all my secrets are terrible. Some are wondrous and beautiful, if a bit risky. "I have a fairy friend." A child Nisha's age could react any number of ways to this sort of claim. Astonishment is the desired result, of course, but there's an equal chance of skepticism and disbelief. After all, when do kids stop believing in fairies these days? The difference is, I have evidence to back up my claim. I wait to see how the girl reacts, ready to promise to show her the macaron sprite, but only if in turn she promises not to tell anyone about it. I have the whole speech ready to go, almost down to the last word, but instead of wonder or doubt, Nisha gives me a generous helping of pity. "That's not the same," she says, putting her tiny hand on my knee in a way that could almost be condescending. "You really should have a friend." The egg willow sits empty and the sky is dark. It's earlier than usual, but I've already closed my doors. I put up the handwritten sign that claims I'll be back soon. The one that used to say back in 10 minutes, but which I changed for something more comfortably vague. Who knows if I'll bother opening up again this evening. Part of me feels drained and washed out. My body is a pile of dirty dishes, and my mind is a sink too full to be of any use to wash them. I sit on the back steps of the cafe, a rare occurrence as the weather has grown wetter and colder. Either my pants get soaked from the melting snow, or my cheeks get nibbled on by a hungry wind. Sometimes it's both. Tonight, my neck suffers the worst of the chill, but I need to think. It's sad to admit that my own establishment has become unsuitable for proper introspection. Sure, the lights, screens, and other equipment have made the dining room into a foreign environment. My table's covered with sundry equipment. The egg willow has been turned into alien territory. But that's not what's chasing me outdoors to do my thinking. Instead, it's the weight of events. Like a stone in a cupcake, the dent in the counter is all but invisible, a blemish one has to hunt down to find. Unlike the marks left over by Agnes when she planted her fork in the wood, there's no melancholy souvenir attached to the damage. All I see in the dent is Gulliver's face, alternately menacing or in agony, holding his shattered hand. "You're my friends, right?" The egg willow raccoons have snuck out of their home and into the cold to meet me. Is where they take shelter from wind and snow, huddled together for warmth. Only the promise of food draws them out, and I make sure they are well supplied. All 6 of them are in the process of circling me, smelling the delicious leftovers on the plate at my side. I make a point of warming the pastries in the microwave when I'm not just dumping them into their castle. It's hard to tell if they see the difference, but the smell travels better, and I expect the warmth is welcome as the nights grow longer. They make little apology about their real intentions. While most are still timid in my presence, inching closer with care, Brioche and Roberts, the 2 most familiar to me, don't hesitate to snatch their share of the bounty. Smart critters they are. When Crimson, one of the most aggressive in the pack, tries to steal Robert's massive square of brownie, the Dawn, leader of the pack, intervenes. There's a clear hierarchy to their strange family, and I wonder how much of a coincidence it is that my favorites are those who sit at the bottom. I guess as long as the cornucopia keeps spilling its fill, we are. I don't know what it is about Nisha's words that got to me. Like nicking a finger in a cheese grater, it's a shallow wound that should be easy to ignore, yet it stings. According to her, while I may have friends, living friends, I don't have the right kind of friends. When even a fairy fails to impress, what is one to do? My ruminations are cut short by a soft metallic bang, as if snow melt had fallen atop the green dumpsters. Even the raccoons are startled, turning their unearthly gaze back to their home. That's when the hissing starts. All 6 of the garbage bears snarl, baring fangs and rounding their back in defiance of what they see. Crimson lops forward, putting himself between the intruder and his family. Brave little guy, though he is always looking for a fight, I suppose. Not that I don't understand him and the rest of his brethren. I may not be hissing and growling, but the hair at the back of my neck does rise, along with my blood pressure. For atop the dumpster is none other than Ophelia's perpetually annoyed familiar, William. The orange cat paces around, tail high despite the ring-tailed threat slowly surrounding him. Black eyes with a touch of blue stare him down, daring him to jump to their level. The cat, however, is content with watching them snarl. I wouldn't tempt them if I were you, I warn him. You think you're smart because you're a cat, but I guarantee they've got you beat. William isn't verbal. He can't talk, and he's shown no sign of being able to communicate on the same level as Brioche or the Dawn. Yet he cocks his head, and the way he looks at me, I could swear he's asking, "Are you so sure about that?" He's an elegant creature, I won't deny it. Where my raccoons are rotund and look every inch as mischievous as they are, William is lean and agile. He's also far larger outside of Ophelia's purse than he looks when curled up amongst her belongings. Speaking of which, since when are you out and about on your own? The question is no sooner out of my mouth than I've got the answer. Call it a sixth sense, or perhaps the vague realization that I didn't lock the front door, but I'm seized with the unshakable conviction that someone's in the Aquillow. Someone unwanted. The raccoons can have the cat. I doubt either party will do more than posture and growl. Meanwhile, I've an intruder. No sooner is the back door open than my fears are confirmed. At the counter, as if she owns the place, sits Ophelia. She's still in the process of shrugging off her coat and pulling off her wool gloves. Even though the door makes a racket as I swing it open with haste, she doesn't even bother looking in my direction. The smugness coming off her is thick as mayonnaise, but nowhere near as welcome in my establishment. "We're closed," I instruct, storming to my counter. Standing behind the register normally gives me a sense of authority in the cafe. It's a subtle reminder that I own the place and that this is my ship. The coffee machine is my second in command, and the grinder is my helm. Tonight, it hits different. Ophelia isn't only sitting at the counter, but she's picked the spot closest to the register, right in front of the dent left over by Gulliver's fist. "Your door says otherwise," she answers, eyes still studying the damage. "So what? Every unlocked door is an invitation to come in?" She smiles, and I know I fell right into her trap. I see it now. Wool gloves, knit hat, all her accoutrement is what I expect from her. Except for the scarf. Tonight, Ophelia is wearing flannel. I should know because it's my scarf she's got around her neck. The one I left behind while fleeing from those knit homunculi of hers. For the first time, I wish I understood her particular brand of witchcraft. I'd tighten that scarf until her lips turned blue. You tell me, Miriam. I allow the moment to sit. Like cake fresh from the oven, I let it cool before attacking it anew with buttercream and frosting. I want my spoon back, I demand. That should be all I need to say. I won't pretend I had every right to invade her home, but what goes around, etc. I have a right to my property, and considering the unusual nature of our occupations, it's not something I trust the authorities to handle. No. Witch things stay between witches. That's the rule, I assume. A chai latte. Pardon? I'm ordering a chai latte. I'm one of those flaky things you were giving out the other day, assuming you have any that aren't tainted with your pride and need for attention. The audacity on that one. Though, if I have to be honest, the customer service reflexes are so deeply baked into my soul by this point that it takes a conscious effort not to fetch a pastry and steam some milk. Instead, I reach under the counter and pull out the red scarf I waved in Gulliver's face when accusing his girlfriend of stealing from me. Tell you what, I say, folding the garment neatly into a square. You give me what's mine, and I give you what's yours. Then we can put this whole ugly affair between us. You can go back to your shop and your little gremlins, and we can stay out of each other's affairs. How about that? I slide the folded scarf, the red somehow brighter than I remember it being, across the counter to her. With a thin smile, she removes my scarf and does the same. Except, as I remove my hand from the red wool, hers stays firmly planted over my flannel. I know what you're doing, Miriam Dufour, she says, staring me down. You've got blood on your hands, and I'm here to help you clean it off. She lets go of my scarf, allowing me to pull it away at last, but she remains seated. Her fingers slide down the counter a few inches, coming to rest in the groove left behind by Gulliver. But, she continues, if you keep spilling it, there's only so much I can do for you. I have two paths ahead of me. There's the one where I sigh, take a moment to compose myself, and then go make some chai tea and try once again to have a calm conversation with Ophelia. It's a path well traveled, each footprint in its dirt an attempt at civility. It is, after all, my greatest weapon. Then there's the virgin path, the road less traveled where I allow pride and temper to dictate my steps. It's the path I often took when dealing with Chef Gagnon and the path that got me kicked out of school. But it's also the path that ultimately led me to Aquilo. Standing at this crossroads, I make a choice. A long sigh escapes my lips, and with it I exhale the last piece of doubt as to my decision. It's as if every cell in my body has finally found peace, and it makes me smile despite myself. You half-wit, I say, savoring her shocked reaction. I get it. You're a powerful, well-trained and educated witch. You can enthrall the whole village with your spells and build an army of little crochet golems. You taste the magic in my recipes better than I can. But being the better witch doesn't give you the moral high ground. When you can claim you've done as much for this town as I have, you can come back here and try to boss me around. Otherwise, take your scarf and leave. Ophelia's skin is too pale to achieve a proper tone of red that matches her outrage. Instead, she turns an odd shade of fuchsia, and her already round cheeks puff out like a blowfish. If she could have struck me down where I stand, I have no doubt she would have. It's a wonder she didn't reach into her purse and try to stab me with a knitting needle. Oh, I press. And if you don't lay off Gulliver, you'll see just how much blood I'm willing to have on my hands. She stands, red scarf clutched in her fist in lieu of my throat. Her back straight and every limb shivering, she stares at me, daring me to take my words back. But I stand firm. Teeth grit, she eventually explodes. Fine then, she spits, tossing the red scarf harmlessly to my face. Serves me right for trying to save a Dufour from her own ignorance. This isn't even one of my scarves anyway." With that revelation, she storms off, leaving me to hold the offending knitwear. I watch as she passes in front of the window, stomping on her way home. Seconds pass as I listen to my heartbeat, still pumping adrenaline through my veins. My fingers weave themselves through the stitches of the scarf, nervous with unused energy. That's the thing with an unfamiliar path. After venturing down for a little while, and once I've lost sight of where I came from, it leaves me with the obvious question. Now what? One of the first victims in any crisis in Aquilo is inevitably my ability to sleep. Slumber is slain and sacrificed on the altar of necessity, forcing me to dig ever deeper into reserves that feel shallower with every catastrophe. If that's how Doris operated, I can't imagine how she made it to a century of age. Even when I do find time to dig myself under the covers and count sheep, my mind conspires against me, conjuring worries and fears that keep my eyes wide open. Every crack and every clink reminds me of the tapping of knitting needles, the apartment settling, or the macaron sprite pacing its cage all sound like a murderous stuffed canary has made its way into my home. And in a way, didn't it? I can't tell if Nisha's new toy is the same crocheted animal that attacked me last night, but if Ophelia is selling those in the same way she did her scarves, these scenarios play through my head as I twist and turn under the comforter, hopeless to find sleep. It takes hours, it seems, but fear and exhaustion eventually settle their dispute, one letting the other take me so that I may rest to be afraid again in the morning. Consciousness starts to erode, reality slipping along with it. The sweet fingers of slumber almost have their grasp on me when I'm suddenly ripped awake once more. Half-coherent thoughts first interpret the sound as the tick-ticking of needles on wood, but the noise is too loud and too deep. It's like pebbles bouncing off a window, or knuckles tapping on glass. I live on the second floor, and there are no balconies off my bedroom. And as my sense of direction reasserts itself, I can tell the sound isn't coming from outside. Slowly, as if I might alert the potential intruder, I slip from under the covers. Naked feet touch the icy hardwood floor, careful to avoid making it creak. Years of experience sneaking behind my parents' back come rushing into memory. I roll my feet slowly with every step, wary of making any sudden moves. Exiting the bedroom, I'm swallowed whole by the darkness of the corridor. Faint reflections of the dim light catch on the many frames that cover the wall, but none of it is sufficient to light my way. The tapping is loudest here, getting more intense with every minute. By the time I've reached a third of the way down the corridor, the source of the tapping has become obvious, if unbelievable. Midway across the wall, the largest frame, the one that reaches from the top of my head all the way to my ankles, is vibrating. With each tap, or knock at this point, it jumps away from the wall a little, as if it were hit by some invisible impact. The frames in my apartment are all souvenirs from Doris, photos that chronicle her life and the lives of those she helped in Aquilo. It's a catalog of her deeds built not on pride, but on joy. Though none mean anything to me directly, I like to keep them around. Sometimes it feels as if Doris herself were my roommate. Except the long frame isn't from Doris, nor is it a photo. The long frame is my very own souvenir of someone I helped in Aquilo. A gift from the friend who convinced me to reopen the cafe. It's a mirror. I stop short of being able to see through the mirror. The knocking is insistent now, frenetic even. The frame bounces off the wall so much that I worry it might fall off, shattering the mirror in the process. Only once I've gathered my courage, if not my wits, do I take the final step, hoping beyond hope that I'll see my own terrified reflection in the glass. Alas, no. Black eyes aglow with but a touch of icy blue stare out from beyond the glass. They're set in shadowy skin pulled tight like leather over an aging skeleton. Like a halo of gauze, white hair frames the face, twigs and dead leaves caught between the strands. I know that face. I remember it calling out for a spoon, gripping my wrist while screaming its demand. It was a hallucination, the same way that I now know that this is a dream, or rather, a nightmare. Bony knuckles rap once more on the glass, gentler and calmer this time, a gesture to get my attention rather than call me from bed. I hadn't noticed, but at the sight of the crone, I pushed my back against the opposite wall, afraid she'd reach out and grab me, but unwilling to leave her out of my sight. Deep into those dark eyes, I see something familiar. More familiar even than that hint of blue, which I see in the eyes of my raccoons. If there was light, I could see that familiarity in every one of the photos that crowd the corridor. These aren't Doris's eyes, but I know a Dufour when I see one. Having my attention, the crone's features relax. Lines of anger etched on her face soften into something grandmotherly. The kindness looks difficult but genuine, an expression that hasn't been used in too long. Like old branches twisted by time, her fingers curl and bend into a beckoning motion. Come closer, her thin lips seem to mouth. The prospect seems outlandish, like accepting an invitation to swim from a hungry shark. It's only after she steps away from her side of the glass that I decide to move closer. After all, this is just a dream. What could possibly happen? Once I'm close enough to the mirror that my breath can be seen upon the cool glass, the crone steps forward. She does so with arms at her side, clear of her white and tattered robes. The motion is careful, as if I were a wild animal she didn't want to startle. There's a howling wind beyond the mirror's surface, yet even at this intimate distance I can barely hear its angry gales. The crone leans in, as close to her side of the mirror as I am to mine. All flavors of terrible scenarios play in my mind, least of which is the fear that she'll grab me and pull me into her world. Instead, with a breath as ancient as her body seems to be, she whispers but a single thing into my ear. Page 73. I start awake, sitting up in bed, brow coated in my own sweat. The gentle nagging of my alarm clock buzzes from the nightstand, demanding that I once again begin the morning's routine. Sitting at the edge of my bed, I look at the cold floor and the slippers I would have normally worn to walk around the apartment. I can still feel the cold wood under my feet, even though my nightly adventure was nothing more than a nightmare. Pressing the button to shut off the alarm, I put on my slippers and shuffle my way across the apartment. The mirror greets me as I greet it, my own reflection harmlessly waving back. It's only when I reach the kitchen, Doris's kitchen, that the vaguely remembered strands of my nightmare come back to haunt me. Page 73. I open the cupboard, taking out a loaf of bread and a bag of ground coffee. Slipping 2 slices of whole wheat into the toaster, I glance back behind me. There's that other cupboard, the one with the recipe books. My fingers slip off the lever of the toaster, and I drop the bag of grounds on the counter. The thought of breakfast gone from my mind, I instead open the door to unveil the vast selection of binders and books that comprise my collection of cooking references. Except there's only really one of them that matters right now. Taking the thick grimoire of Dufour family recipes in hand, I start to flip through the pages. From the start, I count, careful not to damage the paper or lose any of the many unique bookmarks that fill the volume. Each section is full of recipes from all of the witches that came before me, along with many empty pages for new recipes to be added. By the time my count reaches 70, I can already tell which page I'm looking for. It's one without a bookmark, a page that instead has a corner folded in. Looking at the rough, almost violent script and handwriting, along with the numerous and insane notes and scribbles in the margin, there's no doubt who the author of this particular recipe was. Philomène Dufour, the crazed witch of Aquilo. Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.